Today, we'll be hearing the second speaker in this series of webinars focused on Yukon University's research chairs and leaders. I'm sure many of you will have heard of today's speaker, who has been generating a lot of interest and excitement since beginning her role as the first Indigenous Knowledge Research Chair at Yukon University. Jocelyn Joe Strack Daqualama is a member of the Wolf Clan of the Champagne and Ajax First Nation. She's an Indigenous scientist and storyteller who strives to evolve tomorrow's policies by blending yesterday's ancestral lessons with today's systematic knowledge. Jocelyn uses her experience as a trained microbiologist, hydrologist, and policy analyst, along with her cultural foundations, to explore resilient approaches to challenges such as climate change, well-being, and reconciliation. Her research focuses on youth climate leadership, revitalizing storytelling, traditional storytelling, and fulfilling the spirit and intent of the Umbrella Final Agreement. And today she will share lessons and possibilities from her first year in this new and important role. She just stepped away for a second, but as soon as she's back, I'm going to turn the microphone over. Welcome, Jocelyn, and thank you for speaking today.
Goodness Chish, thank you, Sabrina. So ING Daqualama Uye, Kwanlin Ninje, Agunda Iche. My name is Jocelyn Joe Strack. I'm a member of the Champagne Ajax First Nation in the Wolf Clan. And as Sabrina shared, I am Yukon University's first Indigenous Knowledge Research Chair. And I'm honored for this opportunity to be able to share sort of my journey and some of the lessons learned and the aspirations that have come about in this past year. I started my role a year ago in January. And so I'm grateful to say that it's been a very rewarding and inspiring experience to move from consulting. I was a consultant for about 7 years, into really, I guess, coming into my identity as an academic and as an Indigenous leader. Much of my work in the past year has been very focused on growth and building. And so I've been thinking a lot, as I've been trained to by my past leaders and my leaders of today, thinking about how we move forward here in the Yukon, how we fulfill the spirit and intent of our final agreements, how we create a better tomorrow for the children to come, and how we come into our role as stewards, authentic, real stewards of the land and this beautiful place that we all call home. The Yukon, I really believe, is just such a special place in terms of the people that are here in the landscape, and how we all have a devotion to this place around us and the magic that it brings. As a First Nations person, this landscape has ever changed. It's always been one of, I believe, the most dynamic places on Earth, possibly. We went through periods of the ice coming in and moving out, coming in and moving out over this landscape. And it's still changing. It's still one of the most dynamic places on Earth. And then with it, there is a people that were evolved to flow and be at some of the highest places of resilience and skill, to be able to survive in this ever-changing landscape. I think a lot about that when I work with youth, young people, and also with Yukon government in education, and in thinking about what are the strengths of our Yukon in moving forward. What is it that we can pull upon to come together and to create, just a place of harmony, and really come into what it is that why we all live here and come to live it in an everyday life. I believe there is a responsibility for the Yukon to pull upon this strength and resilience and act as leaders for the world. The world is in need of remembering what it means to be connected to land, what it means to be part of community, and what it means to be able to drink the water and to be able to sleep on the ground and to be, in some places, very safe. With all of that, several parts of our Yukon are not safe. There are so many that struggle and that have been left behind. And we now find ourselves today in a place of crisis. There is a crisis happening for those that are struggling and those that are been left behind in our progress moving forward as a Yukon. There is a whole unseen world that many of us go by day by day, and we never even are very aware of it. But there are deep struggles that happen in dark houses, in basements, and in streets. I just want to take a moment to really honor the lives that have been lost, and also speak to you about the responsibility that we all have to acknowledge privilege, to acknowledge opportunity, and to know that we all have a role to play to make sure that as we move forward as a beautiful Yukon, as a beautiful place, that everyone has to come with us, because we are only strong as our weakest. And it is up to us to try and do what we can to bring them forward. And as I call on their strength and their knowing, that's as much of the work that I'm doing. I'm trying to be very, very real in the work that I'm doing, and really acknowledge that so many of us, especially within government, are having to walk through life with a hat on, where we sit down at a table and we negotiate as part of with the identity of our job title, or with the background of our education. But every single one of us has a whole life that we have lived, a whole way of traumas and successes, and just happiness and ups and downs that have served us and fed us throughout our time since birth, and have shaped us into who we are today. Yet that being has no place in the boardroom or in your office. And so we spend majority of our day sitting as an identity that has been crafted for us, rather than really pulling on the strengths of who we actually are, and all of the ups and downs and the teachings of life that brought us to where we are. It's been very interesting working in the two worlds, if you will, because when I find myself in Indigenous-led space, particularly youth space, the healing journey and acknowledgement of our identity and this past that has shaped you is certainly who you sit as. We think about reconciliation and what that means, but reconciliation to me is very much about coming to acknowledge and honor your identity, and the ups and downs, the good, the bad, the shame, the successes, the triumphs of that. All of it is important. And we cannot do that if in our daily lives we're not able to be whole. One of the most rewarding things that I've done at Yukon University is be a leader for the Yukon First Nations Climate Action Fellowship. I'm just scanning really quick. I work with 13 young people and a really amazing steering committee in partnership with the Council of Yukon First Nations and AFN Yukon to bring these young people in a shared learning and growing journey. They are charged by Yukon First Nations leadership, by the chiefs, to develop the Yukon First Nations Climate Vision and Action Plan. So in February of 2020, so almost 2 years ago now, we hosted a pre-COVID, very large climate change gathering for First Nations in the Yukon. We had people all come together. And before the event, we had young people come and elders. And so we had this shared heart youth and elder gathering. On the last day of the gathering, the youth, they had prepared a presentation of what they felt their priorities were for climate. It was things like education, wellness, because we recognize that as part of the land, part of the water, we cannot care for the land if we are not whole and well. And so healing and wholeness is the pathway to bringing forward climate action. Those youth, they stood up on that stage, some of them coming from such difficult places, never been on a stage before. And they spoke with the truth and the honesty and just like the good young energy of their hearts to all of our leadership in our First Nations delegation. And they received a standing ovation. And it was one of the proudest moments. I've had many proud moments since then, I'm glad to say, with my young people that I work with, but that was the first one. And I stood at the back and I kind of was like back in the center, just like watching them like a proud little auntie. And yeah, standing ovation. And then the chiefs, they said, the young people need to set our direction for climate action. So they charged, the team that I was working with, and we developed the fellowship, so the Yukon First Nations Climate Action Fellowship. And it actually came to me in a dream, I'll share with you. I had a dream, and I knew that I was going to be working with a group of young people, and that they would do amazing things. And so when this opportunity came around that where young people had to lead it, I said it needs to be a cohort. It needs to be a group of young people that we bring forward together. And that's where that came from. We have worked, they started in the last year. So just as I was starting my role, the fellows were starting themselves. We've brought them through this amazing journey of trying to be whole people, honoring spirit, self, each other, and then earth, and everything around us. And so in all of our activities, either in person or online, we have ceremony, we acknowledge spirituality, there's a belief. Just belief is such a simple thing that we also do not allow today. We've been working quite a bit with emotional competency, and even doing like formal training as well at communicating in conflict and trauma-informed care, but recognizing that we are in a state of overcoming grief and trauma, ongoing grief. And they need to be able to have their own sense of grounding and strength to be able to lead each other. It has been such a privilege to witness their friendship. Our first gathering was last April, and they immediately were like laughing and just so happy. And they have maintained this strength of their friendship through ups and downs. This year has been very difficult with the discovery of the 215 children in Kamloops, and then the ever increasing numbers that come in. And it has been a real year for really having the Canada in particular, really start to build some empathy and compassion and understanding for the Indigenous journey and what we have been through and why there is struggle still, why there is still so much hurt and need for healing. The young people that I work with are just absolutely incredible, and I love them all very dearly. Our entire circle and space is just full of love and light, and it's just wonderful to be around their energy. Whenever we invite people into our space, they always come away like nourished and just rejuvenated almost by the wonderful energy that the young people have. But we have also, as I said, journeyed through some of these darker, deeper moments that have been happening to society, that have happened even within our small circle, or that is happening to them as individuals. Every single one of our spaces, we start with a check-in. We take sometimes up to 45 minutes, sometimes the whole hour. We have a 2-hour thing, and we take the whole first hour just to check in and see how everybody's doing. We also do this as the steering committee. So we are constantly mindful of what each other are coping with as we're doing this work. And sometimes we are coping with very heavy things, particularly within the past 2 years of pandemic. And so, whether or not it's with your family, with struggles like right now, our check-ins, you can imagine, have been, very somber. But then yet we always come back to this like love and light and hope that is their family. They call it a fellowship family. And thinking about everything that we've created, the other part too that I'll share is many of them have completely changed their life trajectory since joining the fellowship. Some were working in skilled trades and now is a language learner. Others, came from treatment and now is a counselor. We have another who was working for his First Nation and now, really wants to be a filmmaker. And just like they're finding their path. And this is another piece of learning that is so important, is that within this way of working and living, we are constantly trying to control the world that happens around us. We're constantly trying to, I wake up at 9 to 5 and like have so much structure that it doesn't allow us to be dynamic and resilient as the old people once were. As you go into the stories and the teachings, if you have the time even to just sit with water, the teachings of the land tell us to flow, to not control, to flow. And so we need, and as you grow and heal and find confidence within yourself, there becomes this almost recognition, at least like within the stories, that by finding a path of flowing and of ease, of least resistance, life can be a little bit easier. And so as the young people, I would like to believe, and I don't know if I've ever even like overtly explained this or thought about this with them, but in witnessing and being at this other place and watching them grow, I believe that many of them have come into their path, their flow, and they're no longer struggling to control or like fight against expectations of what it is that they think that they're supposed to be doing, but more just like allowing life to guide them and passion to lead them into what it is that they truly can do that best serves who they are and what they have to bring. This is an entirely different approach to education. Completely turns it on its head. It's all about nurturing and nourishing who they are, helping them to heal. And this is what I hope to bring now to Yukon University. So I'm very honored to be working very closely with the First Nations Institute at YukonU, led by Robin Bradish, and there's some staff I see on here, and to develop the Institute for Indigenous Self-Determination. It's still very much in the works. It's a very exciting project of building and dreaming and just imagining, which I love, and thinking about how we can create this sort of whole person educational framework and governance framework. So the entire institute is led by and governed by Yukon First Nations. It's sort of distanced from the university, and it's a Yukon First Nations post-secondary body. And, I'm hesitant to say too much because, as I said, we're still in this place of just like imagining what it could be. And we have a few different ideas, but it's very, very exciting. And one thing that we are wanting to do is really take a bit more of a bird's eye view of what it is that we are accomplishing and fulfilling with the fellowship and bringing it into normalizing and crediting an educational experience where young people or older people could come in for a semester and just indulge in really learning a little deeper in who they are and what it is they have to bring, and reconnecting with spirit self, each other, and the land. I just really think if we were all offered that luxury, and it is a luxury, I won't undermine that we don't all get the chance to do that. I really think that we would, if we were to do that and then come back into our roles within our offices, departments, we would be making different decisions. I do not believe that we would be making decisions in the same way that we do now, because our decisions are primarily based just on our mind space. So we monitor, we analyze, we have data, we have numbers, predictions, and these are all so important, and they've been a really important part of our innovation, our moving forward. However, they are not the full picture of life and all that it brings. So similar to you sitting there with a hat with only a sliver of your being making decisions. In how we make decisions, this is why the whole person is so important, that we need to really just honor everything that we bring to the table and sit and be more conscious and aware of even things like intuition, which are things that we are taught to sort of ignore in replacement of logic. But intuition has a evolutionary purpose, and in the indigenous ways too, in the belief of greater than and spirits and ancestors and all the more, that every culture in the world has some sort of way to contextualize. There is the opportunity as well for guidance, for dreams, for knowing, and for confidence. So without all of those things, I really think that we are a floating people sometimes. And even in the stories, there are stories about becoming floating people of the clouds. People of the clouds. They knew that this would happen to us. So that's one of the things I'm doing. I do many, many things. I'm also very privileged to work quite a bit with various Yukon government departments and land claims boards. So I'm trying to bring this philosophy of whole personhood, of safe space, of just being okay with sitting as who you are, is even just a struggle for a lot of us, because we have not been trained to do that. And so I try and bring some of these teachings into partnerships that I have with folks like at the Yukon Land Planning Council. We hosted a workshop last fall where we had First Nations in, and we were trying to reframe the objectives of Chapter 11 to reflect the spirit and intent of the Umbrella Final Agreement. And to me, the spirit and intent, so the spirit is to work together, right? And it was born out of the time during the 80s, after there was a huge breakdown in negotiations in the early 80s, where a significant monetary but very low authority and landmass offer was made, and First Nations rejected it. And it also didn't include self-government. And it resulted in a total breakdown of the negotiations. And they finally started coming back. But in the history of land claims negotiations, I often think about that breakdown, because I think it was awful for the negotiators on both sides. I think it probably felt really hopeless and like there would be no path forward. After a year of hiatus and just space, they finally did come back to the table with self-government. And then it took, all the way to 93, another 10 years almost to negotiate, but they did, and it resulted in what we have today. But what we have today is not necessarily what was dreamed of in Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow. So for myself, whenever I'm feeling lost and in need of direction of what it is I should be doing as a professional, as a leader, I go to Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow. And I read there, because that document is written as a whole person. It's written with heart. And if you haven't read it, I do encourage you to. It's a wonderful read. And and it's a vision. It's a vision of what could be. So the spirit, they'll come back to that now. So breakdown, but then they came back together in the 80s. They worked really hard. They overcame. There was like a degree of respect and camaraderie that was still, like, I won't say it was huggy, but it was camaraderie in a sense. I've heard many stories of after negotiation shenanigans, so I know that they had a good time sometimes. And then it resulted in the agreements, and they were an agreement to that everyone felt really good and proud of together. That spirit, though, eroded somewhat over the course of the implementation of our agreements. And so, you know, we've been implementing between 93, 2003 was one of the last signing. And we've been establishing our governments, our individual First Nations have kind of put their head down. The vision was one Yukon, right? One Yukon of all people working together. And so now, though, in our Western ways and frameworks of governance, we are very siloed, compartmentalized departments. Like it's just our communication has really crumbled just from the fact of the institutions and how they're set up. I don't think it's a lack of will or want. It's just that we're all very busy, tasked with our jobs, and also stuck in a structure that doesn't really allow us to collaborate in the same way that was envisioned. So that is something to work towards for everybody. The intent is to create a better tomorrow for our children to come. And that is something we can also all get behind. A better tomorrow for our children to come. What does that mean? Like, what does that look like? And we have this luxury to be able to still continue to envision and evolve that, and it will ever envision and evolve. There is no end game in this. Our responsibility, this generation, no matter which generation you're a part of, the job is to create a better tomorrow for the children to come. So for me, when I make decisions, I envision my grandchildren. That's who I make decisions for. And I say that in the very real sense. When I decide whether or not to come into a project and be involved, I say, will this help my grandchildren? And I don't expect that everything I'm working towards will benefit me or even my children. And but I do hope to sow enough, to spread enough, to plant enough that tomorrow, when my grandchildren are growing and then raise their own children, that they live on the land, live with the land, that they speak their language, that they eat food that they have primarily created and brought to themselves, that they know how to sew their own clothes, to build their own home, and that they understand and truly are resilient. That is what I'm working towards, resilience. Because we are not today. We are dependent. And, you know, I'm being a little rough, but we are dependent on systems, dependent on food, dependent on services, dependent on clothes. There's really not very much that we can do for ourselves. And it is the folly of our society. And with this lack of skill also becomes a detriment to even self-worth. And this is why, like, craft, art, creativity that we devalue within the society, it's damaging because it destroys, it doesn't allow an outlet for self-worth and creativity. And so even, you know, young men, I particularly think about, who really struggle within our territory, who are the population that requires, I believe, some of the most attention, is young men. And so many of them are absolutely beautiful. They are artists, they are writers, they are athletic, they are hunters. None of that matters, you know, if you're meant to be working at a desk. And so creativity and just opening up art, and that's something that we've done throughout the fellowship too. They have paintings. I painted this one, in case you're curious. And I painted this when I was very angry, and then I healed, and then I became very confident in what I was doing. It's very symbolic painting. And I was angry at academia. I was angry at my PhD journey. And so, you know, it's like, it's very interesting. All of these pieces of our society that it's just not what we do in your 9 to 5. Not something that I'm striving to change. That's something at the university that I'm really trying to demonstrate the value of being able to allow these outlets, allowing ourselves to actually be healthy, to move. I'm just trying to think, there's one more. The other piece, I guess, and that's sort of, I talk about this, but I'm talking about it in a whole kind of round way, is just thinking about what it means to indigenize and decolonize, right? So I guess I can try and throw some words at you guys that we all talk about, but we don't necessarily have a lot of understanding for, or like a pathway for what that means and how we move forward with it. So much of what I've talked about is the tools. There are tools. So there's song and ceremony. There's like being self-aware. Like I really wish that we could all be deserving of a week without having, well, for me, I do a lot of meetings, but like a week without having to do your heavy lifting, typical sort of work, and being entitled to that at least 3 times a year. Not vacation, still a part of your job, but like just just time for yourself to recharge, to attend to the pieces of your life that you're not able to do because you're devoting everything to work. The other piece that I would really love to see actually is right to food. I would love to have time. Part of the reason why I don't do food is not enough time with working. And then the other piece too is just about wanting to bring, so there's just so many things that our governments and our institutions can do. But I really like the opportunities of thinking about it coming through the university, and raising and educating young people. So for me, in some of my thinking, a lot of what is possible can happen through education. And I really think changing how we set priorities for our young people is going to be so important. So I hope lots of you voted in like the First Nations Education Board referendum, if you could. I certainly did. My daughters go to Grey Mountain Primary, and I'm very anxious to hear the outcome today because, it matters. It matters a lot. And I just think that education today, there's a lot of really positive things happening for our children in the schools. And I don't really wish to dive too deep into some of the politics and challenges there, but I just know that by being able to bring in some of this philosophy of what I've been sharing with you about really never devaluing creativity, it's not an elective, it's an essential. And thinking about like just skills and having self-worth, like even just being able to not measure it, but like at least being aware, are they feeling self-worth? Because I can assure you that many teenagers are not feeling self-worth. And I know this for a fact because I was very honored to be invited to narrate a video for the report of the health and social well-being, I'm forgetting the name, report that looked at comparisons of children in Whitehorse or teenagers, sorry, grade 10 and 9 in Whitehorse all the way into our communities. And teenage girls in grade 8, I think something like 8% felt self-worth. It's really sad. And so there's just so much more that we can do. So if we build and we set some of the foundations with their children to help them carry them through when they're teenagers, there can be such an amazing growth there. And in the Indigenous ways, like the teenage years are meant, the 13 when you're coming into puberty is actually some of your most powerful years, and that's acknowledged. And so they had all of these ceremonies and culture and like practices that really created discipline, created like internal reflection, acknowledged and celebrated them, and just really, we celebrate when they graduate, but like puberty and that 13, that most powerful time for young women especially, we kind of shovel them through still, when really there's an opportunity there for self-worth. But I'm sort of going off on all over the place. That's been my journey. And over this past year, working with these young people, working with partners within YG, I've been very honored. Oh, TikTok. I've been like on TikTok. I don't know if you guys check me out, Auntie Jossie. I've been enjoying that too. One thing I find as an academic, not much for wanting to write academic papers, though there's a little nagging part of me that's like, you should probably write some things, Jocelyn, but I'm yet to prioritize it. Because I just want to be able to share what I have. I don't want to prove what I have. I just want to share it. And I just want to hold young people up. I want to, like nurture them. I want to be a professional auntie. And so TikTok, that's why I was like, I'm going to get on here. And I just discovered it in the summertime. And I was, because one of my nephews came over and he kept showing me videos. I'm like, okay, what are you showing me here? What is this? TikTok. And so finally, after a while, he showed me one that had like a real First Nations, somebody dancing. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. I want to see more of that. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to download TikTok and see what this is all about. And there is this whole community of Indigenous people from across Canada and the United States and like the world really, that are sharing culture, sharing our healing and reconciliation journey, and just like in a very proud and real way. And I love it. And there's teenagers on there talking about what it means to be Indigenous and like navigating their identity together. And that is just so important too. So for me, sometimes I'm just like identity, belonging to a place, feeling loved, feeling safe. Like these are the things that, our young people need, and having purpose. And so, and one of my colleagues, actually, she's one of the ones that brought that to me. She said, love, belonging, and purpose is so much of what is needed. And, so what does a program look like where there's love, belonging, and purpose? And within this beautiful community of the Yukon, there is totally a way to make that happen, I think. Within this beautiful community of the Yukon, there is a way to return to resilience. There is so much that we have to offer here. And we even have it all written out and an intention, a spirit and intent. Like it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so that is a lot of what I do, in a nutshell. And I'm very busy. It's the other thing. And trying my best to balance it all while keeping my own balance, my own well-being, and really prioritizing that and communicating about the importance of that with those that I work around. So I'm very grateful for you all. I'm going to sing you a short song because I can. Because song is one of the best ways to get into your heart. There's even people here on here that are my friends that don't know that I sing and play the ukulele. Are you proud of me? She's gonna be laughing. So I won't tell you the whole story of this song, but I'll just sing you the song really quick. Sing from my mother, lost and need your song, stuck in your care, stuck in your care. Please don't leave me. The path is dark and long. Help me, guide me, love me, hold me, heal a great word. Sing from mother, listen to your song, and know all are wrong. Open the door, summer, to Kingdom Come. Hear me sing. Thanks, everybody. I just had COVID, so I can tell. I never tell anymore until I try and sing. But I'm grateful. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Jocelyn. That was lovely. And you've given us so much to think about and and feel about, maybe. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. I'm going to look for raised hands, or again, people are welcome to type their question into the chat or comment into the chat if they prefer. I see a raised hand. I'm just finding out who it is. And your voice sounded great, by the way.
Thanks for that reassurance.
Okay, it's Sarah. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I really appreciated all your comments about being able to bring your whole self to the work. I really resonates with me strongly, and your song also. My question is, First Nation, a number of First Nations have taken a really strong lead in the climate change space. And as an ally, I want to know, like, what is the best way for us to support and like lift up those voices and support the leadership that First Nations are taking in that particular space?
Thank you for that question. One of the things I think with climate change, and I didn't get into because I wanted to really just stay in the heart space, but the fellows that I'm working with, the young people, are developing a climate vision and an action plan. We're drafting it right now, and it's going to be ready, and we're going to be engaging on it in the springtime. I don't like to talk too much about it because it is theirs, and they've developed it, and it's amazing. And I don't want to like it's their thunder, but I want you to stay tuned for it because they've completely re-narrated why climate change is happening. What I'll just tease you, but like essentially the philosophy is that climate change is a symptom of our disconnect from spirit, self, each other, and earth. So I've shared bits and pieces with you, and so climate action becomes reconnecting with spirit, self, each other, and earth. And so just so much of what I talked about, how we make decisions and what we prioritize, is what is causing climate change, right? And our lack of skills. And so what they are wanting to do is really be exploring what it means to heal and to bring back in so many of these other ways of knowing and being and doing. So that's one thing too. There's, I think, a bit of a difference of understanding. So they always say Indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being. But the knowing is kind of, sometimes I think that's what you can document and analyze and report on, and it's a deliverable. But it's the doing and being that is actually the real. It's real. That's like experience and growth and what is happening. And so in terms of being an ally, it is really working hard to move ourselves out of this head-dominated space and really wanting to just sit and be comfortable in this like heart and spirit space, and recognizing that sometimes things can be slower. Sometimes things don't all need to be written down. They need to be just experienced, and just a bit of a return of just being like grateful and present. So we're very anxious. I didn't even get into anxiety. I've got a whole spiel about anxiety too. But yeah, I hope my answers are never like a box. Thank you. I'll go to Crystal.
Thanks, Jocelyn. That was really, really beautiful and actually quite touching and heartwarming. So I appreciate you spending time with us today. I was quite interested to hear about your kind of workshopping with the Yukon Land Use Planning Council and reflecting on that process from the past to where we are present. And I'm curious to hear any additional thoughts that you may have for us as to where might we go forward in terms of the existing land use planning process, and where we might be able to improve to honor that agreement even better for the next land use plans to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, that is one of the questions, isn't it? To me, it does come, there's a couple different things. And again, I do know that the Land Planning Commission is going to be putting out a report and sort of next steps from the outcome of that workshop. And there was a lot of really wonderful knowledge that came through there in thinking about being land stewards and land relationship planning. And so like one sort of piece is just completely dropping the idea of use and exploitation of land and moving it into more of a responsibility and like shared care, respect, philosophy, and looking at a worldview of the land. The land is alive, you know, it's alive and much, much more than it's doing chemical reactions out there sense. There's a consciousness. The trees are conscious, you know, and we don't believe that, but like just the flow of energy and their awareness of what is around them is maintained to just like the air and energy that passes them. So when you pass, we have huge energy, right? We have big energy. And when you pass a tree, they're aware of you. But we don't acknowledge that in land planning, their dignity. And so there's just a much deeper need to restore that relationship with the land, which things like land guardians, First Nations are doing, and people who are truly like just on the ground. One of the things we talked about is like people who have never been to a place should not be entitled to make primary decisions and be planning it because you have no sense of its being. And and this is again moving us out of this headspace where land planning is primarily maps. I would challenge people to develop a land relationship plan without a map, because then it's all based on values and relationships. And then the decisions come out of the moment and the obligation and the knowing rather than the planning and analyzing. That's just some, but yeah, take a look or reach out to them if you're interested in their report.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I see one here from YFN, the amazing people at YFN ED. I'll just read it. It says, "Thank you, Jocelyn. You are my new AOC." I don't know what that means. I'm supposed to be cool. As an occupational therapist with Yukon First Nations Education Directorate, I have been in classrooms all over the Yukon. Beyond academics, our First Nations students need to feel cognitively, emotionally, and culturally safe in their classrooms. I have unlearned and learned so much from my Indigenous colleagues who have been so patient and generous with me. Thank you. Yes, and that's what I believe too. Like, I especially learned like this idea, like the safety and the cultural, being able to see themselves within the classroom, and then for non-Indigenous students too, right? Like the ability to know a whole nother way of seeing the world is just a wonderful thing, and it can only really benefit, I believe.
Carol has pasted a link to information about AOC, so
oh, AOC, okay, yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you. Well, that's very kind. I did know that.
There's other praise comments in there as well. Melissa Anthony said, "Thank you for sharing today, and that you are such a powerful inspiration in all that you do." I'm sure that many share that sentiment. And Susanna Gartler also said a wonderful song. I wondered if I can ask a question. And I've heard you say before that you're a scientist in recovery. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and whether that, you know, whether your background in science enters your work at this point, and whether that shifted as during your time in your chair role.
I'm really grateful for my background in science and in microbiology. You seem to like the foundations of how things come together, knowing like the smallest thing, even like into our emotions and everything, right? In terms of wellness, I think that way as well. I struggled being a practicing academic scientist because within hard science academia, you are not allowed to express your emotions at all, or write, or, you know, include social obligation. That's changing a little bit, but you still use very dry language to talk about the reality of a home. And so I just really like home. That's a good, so as a scientist, what is home? It would purely just be like how big it is, how many rooms it has, you know, anything that you could count and measure, you could science that. But home is so much more than that, right? It's the place where you feel safe. It's the place where you recharge. It's the place where you know, have family and love and experiences. And like, so I wanted to bring all of that into my science. I wanted to bring it because I was working at Kusula Lake and I wasn't allowed to. And I was like, Kusula Lake's a part of who I am. I have so much more to tell you about Kusula Lake than like the little bacteria that I measured, which I do care for. But like, so that's the depth. So I don't know, after listening to me, if you could imagine me just doing like math and filling very small tubes with like liquid. So I did just like one tube to the other tube. Got pipette them. You know, so that's why I call myself in recovery, because now I feel so much more alive and authentic to who I am, being able to talk. But now I do really still honor the knowledge that science has brought me. And as a First Nations person, the land has all the teachings that you need. All of it. Anytime you have questions, if you are observant and aware, the land will tell you. The land taught people how to do everything. Spider taught us how to make spider webs, or how to make fishnets, sorry. And there's just so many examples like of the animals teaching us, of the land teaching us. And we're really like pulling out some of the understandings from even like microbiology, especially about balance and harmony and like how things should, there's a lot of real good teachings within science that science can direct us, but and bring it into like how we should be living. And that's where I'm very grateful for it now.
So much.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. It's nice to see you.
We do have time for maybe one or two more questions. So I'm just scanning for raised hands or watching the chat, or I'm going to turn the camera on and ask a question. That's certainly an option.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're feeling.
I've got one more question. If no one else will.
Please go ahead.
You spoke a lot, and I mentioned in my first question about bringing your whole self into your work and into the different spaces that you occupy. So are there like concrete examples of how you can do that? I mean, I know bringing an instrument, but that might not be practical in some spaces like that. So what are the things that you do to ensure that whatever space you're coming into, that you're making sure to bring your whole self?
Yeah, like there's different, for me and my own like self-work, it's changed throughout my journey, right? And like what it is that I feel is helping me to be like the best me that I can be. Like right now I'm like really into like yoga and meditation. I have a Zen room, just like the best. Cleaned up my house. I got COVID and I Marie Kondoed my house. The game changer. It like is very helpful. And I have young children, so I'm just like, oh my god, my house is clean, and it's like it's not chaos. To like, anyway, I found that very helpful. But in terms of like creating space, I'm sorry, I have dogs. They bark all the time. But one thing that I do really like doing is like creating safe space in workshops and in spaces with youth, or like I do really like doing that. And ways that I do that, and this is very much with teachings from my elders. One thing I do is often have elders with me. It's really amazing. But you know, we always open with ceremony and song. And sometimes like the song I just sang you is like a light song, but there are very deep songs, very songs that can call the ancestors, like songs that are intended to be powerful. And so we open, you know, with song and ceremony, and then a check-in. And you know, a check-in seems like a really simple thing, but I actually think it is very good, because it allows people to sort of acknowledge things that are happening for them and share as they're comfortable, and then be able to just sort of be almost like put it aside and be able to attend to the work a little bit better. or to like sit with it, but with a bit more comfort and knowing that all of those around them are there for them. It creates community, right? It creates like knowing within each other. The other things that are really nice to do too, like I said, is like art. And but so when I'm doing something, for example, with yes, I'm bored, like it becomes a little bit more on me to try and create the safe space, and just sort of create an experience, right, rather than just a meeting. And so something that causes you to be a bit more reflectful. The other piece too, of course, is storytelling. Storytelling, and that's essentially what check-in is anyway. But I really love our Kwede Kwonder, like our old stories. I find that they're really amazing, but they are to be honored, and there's a lot of protocol. But then even people's just like personal stories, like I told you the story about the land claims and the breakdown, but like that's an important story. And so just bringing more of that acknowledgement through storytelling, through song, and through ceremony, I just really think helps, make that safe space. And humor. The other one's humor. Humor is really important. And whenever I talk to the old people, like the elders, I'll talk to them about storytelling. I'll be like, what should I do? And they're like, you gotta laugh. Okay, let's laugh then. Like, yeah. Thank you. I see a quick question here from Gertrude too that I'll answer really quickly. How would you like that natural sciences connect to Indigenous knowledge in their actual research practice and creating awareness? The science, Indigenous ways and Western knowing. I'll bring it back to what I was talking about in terms of like the knowing, doing, and being. To me, that's one of the greatest like differences sometimes. Like, so Western science is so much about wanting to document, and like in our Western governance as well. We want to document, report, improve, and deliverable, and like what the priorities are, and like what the tangible things of the work is something that you can produce. That's often like in paper in the world that I work in, at least. Like, whereas in Indigenous, I think it's a lot more about the experience. Like, so does it have to be documented? Does it all of it, like, and yeah, it's about the experience and the ability to enhance people's knowing. Hi, sweetie. It's 1 o'clock, right on the dot. I entertained her for exactly. She's homesick. Come here, sweetie. Come say hi. Yes, sweetie. Look at him on a call. Say hello. You're right there. So with that, I will say goodness cheesh, and thank you very much, Sabrina, and to everybody for listening and spending this lunch hour with us. See, I'm sick.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. That was wonderful. And thanks everyone for joining. Hope to see you at a future Scope Talk.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I hope the rest of your day goes well.
Thank you so much. Mommy.